in. So tell me who you are and what your official title is now.
Yes, so Jake Sally, head of immersive development at Riot. For those that don't know, Riot is the content innovation arm of Verizon. So we spend a lot of time doing three very distinct things. On one hand, it's working on kind of Riot Originals, which is probably what everyone knows us most for, which is these very artist-driven, innovative projects. We had three at the Sundance Film Festival, which I think give a good snapshot. We were part of the Gloomy Eyes team, which is kind of like a dollhouse style, Tim Burton-esque love story in virtual reality. We had a multi-user mobile AR combined with projection mapping experience called The Dial. And we had Asad J. Malik's most recent project called The Jester's Tale, which was on the Magic Leap. So very wide range of projects. So that's kind of bucket one. In the middle, we spend a lot of time kind of working with Verizon and their portfolio of brands, Tumblr, Huffington Post, TechCrunch, Yahoo Mail, to kind of like think about how we bring those brands into the future. What does it look like to integrate augmented reality into these experiences? Are there VR experiences that may make sense for them? So that's kind of bucket two. And then bucket three is working with Verizon on the rollout of their 5G network and thinking of kind of innovative, interesting ways to showcase the technology in the short term and create some really powerful user experiences as the rollout continues into more consumer-friendly version.
Badass. That's a great overview. And I'd also like to add that especially over the last year, Jake in particular and his team at Riot have stepped up in a huge, huge way. I don't know if the immersive art and entertainment industry would have been able to like muddle through 2018 if you hadn't stepped up. There's so many projects that you've like helped directly or indirectly. Really, really want to applaud all the. In fact, everyone in the chat log, give Jake some love because he's been a huge, huge, huge help to so many artists that I know. Yeah. So with that. In which nobody said anything on the chat log. You've got no love on the chat
Probably
log.
no applause emoji.
There we go. Now people are jumping in. I always like, because part of what is fun about this is I want people to feel like they know you, like as like a person and a human. So if when they meet you in person, it'll be a little less intimidating. Not that you're an intimidating guy in the least, but and so part of that is like getting to know like who you are and your background. So like I know you were born in Denver, right? Or at least you grew up in Denver.
Yes,
so like tell me about like how you like your early years in terms of like getting into art and entertainment in general, and then maybe give us a little bit of a story of how you got to Riot. Like
yeah, so
you were born.
So I will, very, very, very few people know this. I was actually born in Los Angeles. I'm not proud, but it's true. But I was raised in Denver, Colorado, and very, very far removed from entertainment, from technology, all of it. Went to school on the East Coast, and I knew a couple things as I was getting ready to graduate as an English major, and that was I never wanted to wear a suit. I loved reading and I loved writing, and I wanted to get paid to do some amalgamation of those things. And that very quickly narrows the number of jobs you can have to basically entertainment. So I struck out with a backpack full of dreams to Hollywood, ended up working at WME IMG, which is the talent agency here in Los Angeles, in the mailroom. So I had staplers thrown at my head, like all of the traditional mailroom goodness. And while I was there, I worked for this agent, Craig Castell, who reps now like these enormous stars like Ryan Coogler, who did Black Panther, Kerry Fukunaga, who did True Detective. But he really, like in his DNA, is a incredibly unique agent in that he is a massive supporter of the artists and like these Sundance-esque creators, which is where I attribute most of my initial love for the creative community, is to him, wholly and singularly. So I was working there, and I knew I was ready to get out. I was tired of having staplers thrown at me. So I ended up moving over to Hasbro Studios, where I was working for the head of the studio and the head of the film team. And that's kind of where I first got my first real taste of virtual reality. Had started demoing a couple different things. I had gone to actually Renee Kaleidoscope Festival, where I saw The Chair and Surge were two of the most influential pieces for me of really like, oh, okay, this is real. I'm in. So I was doing a lot of research, and I was like, I want to be the first, virtual reality executive.
Guide.
They have all these brands, Candyland, Monopoly, that like are these immersive worlds. So I spent a lot of time pitching different things, and they did not go well. Hasbro is a slow-moving company, which is fine in its own right. But the kind of like tipping point for me was I saw the very first trailer for The Void, which was, I think, not in any way indicative of what it actually was, but it was fascinating. And I was like, what is this company? Where do they come from? I went on their Facebook. They had a phone number. I called the phone number, and it's the CEO's direct line. And so Ken and I talked for about 30 minutes before he asked me who I am, which is, I think, indicative of how wholesome and awesome he is. I mentioned I was looking for Hasbro, and, is there any way you guys are bringing this to Los Angeles so we can do a demo? They weren't at that time, but he was like, look, if you ever want to, come down and check it out, we'll be here. And I bought a ticket that week to go down that weekend to do a demo of The Void. And I did that demo, and it was basically all over from there. I came back a raving lunatic and was like, push, was watching kind of like in time with my, fanaticism over VR, the consumer release of something like the first Oculuses, and like it was becoming a thing. I had an iPhone at that time. I threw it in the trash and bought a Samsung so I could actually use the Gear VR on the daily. And I basically quit my job going into winter break it was like, I'm not doing anything until I get into the VR business, which is particularly difficult on the creative development side, I think. And I landed over at 2-Bit Circus, kind of luckily coming out of the break.
And what year is this?
So this is into, 2016, start of 2016. So we basically started 2016. I started working at 2-Bit Circus. 2-Bit at that time had done all of these, like, they're kind of like, they were still like very much like Imagineers for hire. They hadn't made their location-based entertainment space in downtown LA, but they were making these incredible VR pieces. Basically, every rule that people said you shouldn't do, they were doing. They had done this VR piece where they made a helmet rig and had someone run down a football field, and you were in the POV of like a punt returner. They married that to haptic plates. I mean, it was, especially for the time, like,
yeah,
it was,
I saw that at the Future of Storytelling.
Yeah.
You stood on this funny little platform, and it was pretty compelling. It's amazing how much mileage you can get from just like a vibrating piece of wood that you stand on.
You have to do very little. And I think what the big thing I learned from that was like a piece that would normally be actually pretty nauseating with any amount of haptic input instantly grounds you, and you can get away with a lot more. So I worked there for Nancy Bennett, was helping kind of the 2-Bit team on their VR side start ideating around kind of original ideas rather than doing this kind of work for hire models. Like, what are some of these originals we can do? How do we start to like break out of like the big branded corporate pieces and do some things that, are both boundary pushing, but also fun. We ended up doing about 16 projects with the YouTube creator program. So working with kind of YouTube had identified a couple of their stars that wanted to get into the immersive space, but had no idea how they were going to do it. And they'd work with 2-Bit Circus and say, hey, we worked with like Sam Macaroni, for example, and said, hey, I want to do a piece where you're in the middle of like a shoot 'em up Nerf gun fight, like at a family barbecue. And we come in and say, okay, well, there's a couple different ways you can do something like that. So we started to build out a slate of projects, and 2-Bit, as I was there about a year and a half, really was like finalizing their plans to bring this location-based like 2-Bit Circus to life, which is awesome, but it's not really what I do. So I was kind of like looking for like, what's the next step for me? I don't necessarily, there's not too much original like narrative content coming out of most LBEs, and landed over at Riot, which ironically was like in a very similar spot to 2-Bit when I come in, which is like 2-Bit was very good at one specific thing, which is like their engineering firepower was incredible. And they were saying, how do we start building out a narrative slate with this understanding? Riot had done about 200 360 videos of these like run and gun breaking news documentary pieces. They'd worked for every major brand and company in the world at that point, and had really in the space like they could do it faster than anyone. And I think for the time that they were doing it was really important. Is they could do it. They were doing this project, the turnaround, where they would fly to a country, shoot a video, have it cut, uploaded, edited, colored, everything in 48 hours, which with the Google Jump algorithm, which was, it's just insane. So they were in the same spot of like, okay, we have an expertise in one specific category. How do we expand that into like a much more narratively driven, artist friendly company? And so when I came in, it was really, look, we're at the tail end of, I think, 360 being like the bread and butter of most companies. How do we take all the incredible resources that Riot has now that it's been acquired by a couple, the acquisition chain's ridiculous, but like effectively Verizon. How do we take, like our marketing and promotional support that is incredible? Riot has, I think, some of the best designers in the business. They make great swag, film posters. And how do we insulate the artists that have like are spending blood, sweat, and tears on these projects and have spent years thinking about them, developing them, and come in as kind of like the support team? It's like the mentality was, how does Riot become the world's best cheerleaders for XR artists? And how do we, let us make the film posters and the promotion, let us give you some funding to finish the project so you can focus on doing what you do best, which is like the creation part, which artists like rarely have the time to do in the space, given, it's always fundraising and all these other things.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And by the time an artist gets to the end of a production, they're so spent, it's like having to think about then doing a festival run and doing any kind of marketing and do the push to actually get an audience built up around a project. Oh, it's so hard. It's like running a marathon and then be like, now you got to run another marathon.
Great warm up.
Yeah, exactly.
So that went really well. So we had projects like Dinner Party, Mind at War with Sutu, which is this incredible tilt brush documentary.
Has that been released yet?
It's coming out next month.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just sitting down.
Is that going to be at South by? Because I think they've announced the South by lineup.
It will not be at South by, but it'll be available for download. So on most major platforms. Yeah. And so and then Terminal 3 was the other big one coming out of that initial kind of like first run. And so we've just been kind of like continuing the same, and getting more integrated with Verizon and like helping out more of the internal brands, as well as like more and more artist support, which I think has been pretty fantastic. It's a very long-winded answer to one question, but
no, dude, that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted the download, and now I think people have a pretty good sense of where you came from and what you're working on now. So I guess one line of like questioning or not questioning questions. Very skeptical of you. I'm questioning, are you real?
Okay. Bring it. You got nothing to hide.
No, I wanted to dive into like that initial slate of projects. Like, what have you learned from that first batch over the last 2017, 2018 kind of span?
So we'll go through them one by one. And each of them had a very specific goals. Like, yes, the artist support, but like Terminal 3, for example, was our first like big foray into augmented reality, definitely headset based. And it was a couple things. What does the creation process look like working with college students? Asajj Malik was a junior in college at that point. And like, is that a viable path to like premium content? The answer is resoundingly yes. And it kicked off for me, honestly, like a huge spur of like basically going out to every university in the country and saying like, who do you have? Like, let's think about working together.
My read is that Asajj is a pretty unique person, though, right? Like, have you found many other people at a college level that's producing at that quality?
Short answer is no. I think because I think in specific subsets of it, yes. Why Assad is very singularly Assad is that he is doing the work of a director. He's doing the work of like a Unity dev, and he's doing the work of a like creative director. He's running a business. Like it's substantial. I haven't met anyone on either, but like on either side of the collegiate scale that's doing really all of that simultaneously.
Yeah. Well, and it works. I mean, for me, it's great because I just deal with Assad.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's like, I trust him and I'm like, you're going to get it done.
Yeah.
And that's what like somebody like us really wants is like, a person that you're like, okay, I don't want to know too much about how the sausage is made. Go get all of your college friends, like do it. And
he does two things that I think are very important for the growth of the industry, which is one, he is very, very cognizant of costs and trying to make these projects profitable / just sustainable. He spends a lot of time thinking about how to crunch it down. He is very shrewd in that respect, which is fantastic. And the other piece, which is like one of the things I think a lot about for a XR project is kind of like you want discovery, wonder during the experience, and you want reflection after the experience. And he's one of the best at the reflection part because he ties in every single project to a larger societal like undercurrent. For Terminal 3, it was this idea of immigration at large and what, how do we put people in the shoes of this issue and like to have a tangible experience. For A Jester's Tale, it's dealing a lot with artificial intelligence and the role of that and how it manipulates people. And it makes these things resonate and have like A, resonate, and B, have like a fantastic press cycle. And you get to like, it becomes this jumping off point for a much larger discussion, which is really, really good. It's hard to do that with projects all the time, but I think it is very important.
Yeah. And that, I mean, the idea of VR or AR for PR isn't new. And I think that was like somewhat baked into Riot's DNA. I mean, the videos that you guys produced before you even showed up, that was like, I think that was a huge reason for why Riot took off so much is that you do like, we actually curated, I think one of your Riot's first 360 ones, it was like about the earthquake and,
Nepal earthquake.
The Nepal earthquake, and Susan Sarandon was the narrator.
Yeah.
And I think like in terms of the number of people that actually saw the VR experience is really small compared to like the amazing wave of PR that you got off of that piece. But I think that's actually still a really important thing for all of us to think about is how can you create experiences that start a dialogue that have a much bigger impact than just the people that see it. I think it's still super relevant.
It's a great lead into so for Terminal 3, it was really looking at how feasible is it to work with college age students in the XR space who are digitally native. So I think again, it's like they have a leg up on our, old withered adult dead brains. But so like that on one hand, but also can you make a easily repeatable exhibition format that you can take this AR experience to different places and not have it break the bank? One of the biggest things that is, I think, continually frustrating is it's hard to get these projects in general at whatever scale into a museum, into a cultural institution. It's one of the hardest things. And like for us was like, from a business side, how do we scope down the lift from them is like, how do we fit everything inside of a box? And, it can be a big box, but it has to like, box needs to have like all of the HoloLenses, most of the stuff that you need to set up the like exhibition in terms of like, we had CCTV cameras, very specific stools, like all of the graphics that would get put on the wall that said like Terminal 3 and the digital signage. That was like a Google Drive link that had all of them and they could just print them out at their local printer, like making it as easy as humanly possible.
Well, and that gets back to, it's like, I think of you guys as really like distributors, like, because when I think of, like in the traditional biz, what a distributor is, it's kind of like a marketing arm, but it's somebody that it's like logistics plus marketing in my mind. And that's I mean, you guys provide a lot of other value too, but in terms of like the primary value, that's what I think of as somebody to help manage those logistics and then do the hustle for getting the word out and doing that PR cycle and all that.
Well, and especially the exhibitions are my favorite part of all of this. Like, I think there's a distinct difference between us having, before I was there and I was like, we'd put up headsets and they were great. You'd watch the piece and it was awesome, to like kind of now we do these incredible installations that we spend a lot of time building out. And like, again, they have to be something that's repeatable. All of the projects we took to Sundance, all of those fit into a 16-foot cube truck and are now back in Los Angeles and ready to be deployed somewhere else, versus just kind of like building it at a festival one time. You might as well just throw a match on it and you start from scratch if it wants to go to Tribeca or South by or Venice. But so kind of touching on the Nepal earthquake type setup is like that.
Oh, we had a question about the name of that. Do you remember the name of it? I could look it up on my end.
Yeah, it's called Mind at War.
Oh no, not the Sutu piece. The Nepal earthquake one with Susan Sarandon.
I think
that was before your time. I know.
If you type in Nepal earthquake riot, I think it will definitely appear somewhere.
Yeah, and Susan Sarandon. That would probably be the best. I don't think it had a particularly I think it was called like the Nepal earthquake, because you guys were doing like kind of like news, right? So I don't think
totally
the titles were particularly
they weren't evocative.
Yeah.
But so we're talking a lot about the impact that these projects can have, and looking at Sutu's piece, this project Mind at War, which was Sutu's my personally favorite tilt brush artist in the world. And he's got like 4,000 hours, and he was making this project called Mind at War, which basically took you through a series of these frozen moments, these memories of this Iraqi war veteran before, during, and after the Iraq war, and kind of like his struggle to kind of overcome PTSD from the war and like how he can move forward with his life. It's beautiful. I seriously, I go back to it probably on a monthly basis. I'm just like, I love tilt brush. So like, what was the point of this project? Why did we invest in this one over all of the other things that we were looking at? On one hand, I was extremely interested in looking at VR native tool sets as a production pipeline to decrease the costs of production overall. We've seen a couple different tilt brush medium-esque projects, like Dear Angelica, all of Sutu's work. And I think it's figuring out, like, the beauty of that is Sutu runs a lean team, right? As you're like, oh, okay, it's like you have one tilt brush artist who can basically rip out entire scenes in a day, a couple days, depending on the complexity of them. You have a couple Unity devs, and you have one person who's being recorded for voiceover. And through that, it's like, boom, you have an entire project. The beauty of that is you're like, okay, like, just thinking it through from a Riot perspective, it's like, okay, going back to our regular, like, quick cadence of output, is there a way to do something similar with the VR tools that like has a better lifetime, right? 360 video that was stitched 2 years ago looks awful. Versus, that tilt brush, it can look good forever. Those assets could potentially in the future be used for something in augmented reality. And being able to be like, okay, if we had, 3 rooms, we could be doing 3 episodes, a week of these things, just like cranking them out. And again, it's important to like still have it through the context of like quality narrative, but as a production pipeline, fascinating. I am astounded every single day by how few people make projects with things like Tilt Brush, Google Poly, Quill. Like, it's the cheapest production you can do. Is you're like, basically.
Well, and now that animation is being incorporated into those pipelines where you can do almost everything in headset, that's quite exciting.
It's incredible. So I'm waiting for that moment when everyone realizes, holy shit, this is super doable. Like the Tilt Brush team, they're crazy. They add a brush like every month, basically.
Yeah. But they still haven't added animation. I've been getting after Drew and Patrick about that for like ever. I remember in 2015, I was like, please, like, when's animation coming? You got to do it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we're working on it. So I need to harangue them next time I see them about that. Like, when is it coming out? It's got to be. I know they've been working on it, so it has to be. It's just a matter of time.
My guess, and this is completely in the dark, is, the beauty of Tilt Brush is, and I have this VR setup at the house, and I use it as my lab for all of my friends to come through and just like get a better sense of how things are working. Is like every single person knows what to do within 30 seconds, and you have to be able to I don't think anyone's going to learn how to animate in 30 seconds, but it needs to be like 2 minutes, and to
Yes.
optimize that perfectly is probably very hard. Like I haven't played too much around with the quill animation, but like it's not the easiest thing in the world.
Got a question about tilt brushing. I don't think tilt brush funds anything.
They don't, to my knowledge. If they
I've
do,
never heard of
let
that.
me know. But
Yeah.
I think like there's if you are an artist or looking to do things, is you could be potentially a tilt brush artist in residence, which they still do a lot of. And that program, if you haven't, just go look up the tilt brush and artist residency program. It's also astounding. Like they're very quietly just, again, really innovative team over
Yes.
there.
Yeah, I
But
know a couple of artists that have gone through that. Isaac Cohen, who's a part of our community,
right, yeah.
super talented guy. It seems to work really well for people that are sort of like those solo VR creator people that love to do, their own thing.
Yeah.
Works really well for that. Um,
But okay, so real quick, because I do want to keep going. It's like, so Mind at War, it was like VR native tool sets as a production pipeline on one hand, and then also looking at the current VR for good model and how do we the hypothesis was like, okay, we're doing a lot of VR for good, which is in general, it's usually like a XR company is partnered with a nonprofit. They make a piece together funded by some amalgamation of different things. It's released generally on the nonprofit's website or different social channels. Maybe it goes to a couple festivals, or like if they're lucky, they get into a high impact event like a future of storytelling or a Davos type thing. And that's basically the end of it. And I've found is like there isn't a concrete goal of what they want it to do. It's just like by creating it, we will raise awareness, and therefore like the domino effect will happen and people will take the initiative themselves, versus basically the idea for me, and like when Sutu was looking for partners, it was really who's going to be that impact producer. And so the basically what I posited to him was like, look, there's VR for good. Let's try and see if we can get to VR for change, which is like from the very start, no, these are the three, existing laws that we want changed. This is the person we want out of office. Like, what is that thing that we have
that's so smart.
as the North Star? So we worked with this company, Picture Motion, out of New York, to like help build the strategy, have our like hit list of influential people that we wanted to get in front of. We had our, congressmen that we were going after. And it was kind of like a three-pronged approach, which was like, we can always take it to like film festivals, that's fine. But like from the nonprofit perspective is I wanted to have a piece that we could provide for free to any nonprofit working in the space that wanted to use it. So we were targeting veterans mental health and PTSD nonprofits. And we reached out to about 100 of them to say, hey, we have this project. We have it in 360 video form. If you have VR capabilities, we have it as a 6-stop experience. We will provide it to you for free, show you how you uploaded all of those different pieces to like get your message out in a new and interesting way. That was super successful. So that part was great. The other part was Riot, basically at cost to ourselves, would take it to these different events throughout the country. So we did the Heroes Gala for the IAVA, Iraq Veteran Afghanistan Association. So we flew to New York, brought all of the tech out for a team that, the IAVA doesn't necessarily know what they would be doing with that. So we were like, look, we reached out to them proactively and said, look, let us bring it, provide it for you, no cost to you. That's just like, again, another means to an end. So we did one there. We did one at the Skirball Center in Los Angeles. Then the third part, which candidly I think did not go well, was like really having that targeted list of like, here are the 3 pieces of legislation that we want changed. It's very hard to do that, which is, again, not to say the main people we're going after, like one of them was on maternity leave. So there's all these elements that I think make it tricky, but ultimately failure. So
But it's so good to have because that's one thing that I've been talking to a lot of people that are doing social impact projects, is trying to, if revenue isn't the measuring stick that you're going to use, defining your own terms for success and like how do you quantify that impact. So having specific concrete things like this project is going to move the needle for this piece of legislation. I think that's such a smart thing, and it makes those projects accountable in the same way that commercial projects are accountable just to the bottom line. So I think that's actually really quite nice to have it be that specific. We're going to change this legislation.
It also pinpoints your talking points. It's like when these things start to get picked up from a PR perspective, this is the moment you have to have that direct change. And if it's just more of this abstract, here's an issue, we'd like to see it change, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's, no one will do anything. You have to just push them in the direction. So that was kind of like the goal with that one. And then the third one was Dinner Party, which was a cinematic 360 piece. Riot was known for kind of this run and gun news and doc content. Candidly, I would say overall it was more of a volume business, not a quality. The quality of the content was fine, but I think there was a lot of room, from my perspective, left to be desired. So that was working with Angel Manuel Soto, who's kind of like an in-house director and had been working on this project for 2 years, basically, with a couple incredible writers. And it was marrying kind of cinematic 360, some motion capture, and some super high-end CGI. And that went incredibly well too. And it was kind of again, there's a lot of horror experiences. This, I think, was more narratively driven. It's the story of this biracial couple in the 1960s that are allegedly abducted by aliens and the impact it has on their marriage. And so you see the alien abduction from both of their perspectives coming out of this dinner party that's had. And so that was one of us as Riot, getting a better sense of the investment required and technology required to do high-end cinematic 360. I love cinematic 360. I do believe in it. I think it's been one of those things where it just boils down to cost and is it getting out as far as it want? I did an analysis of all of Riot's different, where Riot had all of its 360 content and where it was performing the best. And the platforms were fine, but it still boils down to YouTube and Facebook by a more than a factor of 10. Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Just where the audience is.
That's where the audience is. So designing the pieces for that is great. Again, as incredible as it is to have, the full ambisonic audio, all of the pieces you want when someone's watching a headset, 95% of your market is going to be on YouTube or Facebook.
But that's so hard because they're going to be watching it on their laptop. And it's what's the point then, right? I mean,
you should just A, on one end is optimize for it, and B is if we're talking about a difference of do you go with regular audio, whatever it is, for 10,000, or bump it to 50,000? Consider if you want it, having it for 10,000 and just moving on, because it's what's most likely to get the piece made, which I think in the short term is still ultimately the objective. Is the industry will continue to catch, consumer industry will catch up, but creators want to create, make sure that remains the goal a little bit.
Yeah. Alex had a question.
Hey, Alex.
Log. Thoughts on 360 and volumetric? Where do you think live action is headed?
Live action, I think, is going to remain pretty difficult in the short term. I can say candidly, I haven't kind of had any quality conversations with financiers and buyers around 360. I think if you're going to do it, it should be kind of individual episode, going for episodic 360 right now, super difficult. You have to have a very, very, very clear value proposition to someone of why that makes sense. I think at minimum, it should be doing ad sales if you're releasing on something like YouTube, which I'm still don't really know why more people don't do that. And look, the YouTube VR side is it's flourishing. They have pretty solid numbers for it, but you have to go look at some of those highest, even the higher ones, it's not that many. So I think the era of $1 million 360 productions, 10 episodes, 5 episodes, 4 episodes, not really there right now. It's going to be
that.
Yeah. And look, it's not to say it can't happen, but it's got to be something. It's going to be that financial Frankenstein of 6 arts grants and cultural investments that is outside of, I think, the more traditional entertainment based buyer's market right now. It's really figuring out. The thing I consistently see is people want these assets that are going to have a long life cycle, right? that can exist now and will be as good in 5 years. So that's really tough. The volumetric side, I'm super excited about. I think like Metastage is my personal favorite stage right now. I think Christina's made something truly beautiful and creator friendly. Like it's been the most enjoyable, stress-free shoot of my life thus far. And having the backing of Microsoft, like they're doing cool things. They're doing very, very cool things. And it just looks, it's like a crazy
Yeah,
set.
in terms of quality, it definitely like Metastage is like the highest quality. Their cost is like pretty expensive. Which I'm like, every time I see Christina, I'm always like, wow, it's like I really want to use your services more. And then on the other end, you have DepthKit, which is like the most like affordable. We've both done projects that use DepthKit. And I think you need both of those. You need the high end, and I want the high end to even get higher. Like it's still a little rough, still kind of in this weird uncanny valley. Like if you get too close to any characters that are captured with the meta, you're like, oh, your eyes are like flat and not curved, and there's little tiny geometries that don't quite, like hair stuff. It's like.
My favorite thing I've done actually is for Adjuster's Tale. I was in it the other day, and if this is someone's volumetric face, is actually putting your head like inside their head, and you see the inverted version. It's very weird, but I don't know. There's just like something to it that I want to try and figure out. Why is that interesting? Like, does the face talk differently when it's like their internal thoughts or something when you're inside?
Yeah.
I don't know, but.
It reminds me of spheres where, you put your head inside the planets, and it's the same thing. It's like when you put your head into something, it's like you should get rewarded for that. I think that's a good tool to have in your tool bag, to have, because people are going to put their head inside things. Like it's what they do.
Uniquely XR, right? Which is these like proximity triggers or whatever you want to call them, of like that. The variable distance changes how you interact with it. The guys from Headspace, Victor and I thought, and JP had a really, really interesting point, which went from Dev Lab when we did that a couple months ago, of like looking at objects and like imagine looking at a clock. And the longer you look at it, you start to hear the internal workings of the clock. Like
nice.
That to me has resonated. I just love that conceptually. It's like, are there different things that do that? But
so much. I mean, it's like gaze-based interaction is so powerful, and I think people forget, like, it's so simple, but it's like it's the piece of input that you get for free, with any headset-based experience.
And the gaze of like, there's that idea of like the instant gratification of it, totally, but like more of that subtle one is like the longer you're looking or like pontificating on an object, but like the more you're rewarded for doing that.
Yep. The deeper you can go.
Got
a couple other questions. So we have one from I'm going to butcher the name, Sparsha Huja. College students looking for 3 biggest tips for college students, I'm guessing, for like making it in this field. What do you got?
I would say one thing, which is like, do one thing really well. So like Assad's first project, Terminal 3, succeeded because he wasn't like, hey, let's ball cap 10 people and like put them in this procedurally generated world. No, he was like, no. We're going to use DepthKit, super affordable, easy to use, to capture a bunch of people and give the consumer like one very specific feeling and moment, and tie it to a larger like societal thing, which is like, let's just have all capped people that we can talk to, and that's great. And he did it extremely well. So I think that goes a long way, which is, especially when you're coming at it from like my perspective, is like I don't need to see the craziest world, especially from like the college age, is like no one's expecting, and not a knock against it, it's like no one's expecting like you to pull out Skyrim VR on this. It's like it can be something very simple, and if you can show one mechanic incredibly well, that is a showstopper. And the scope of like Terminal 3 is like, it's 10 minutes long. It's not incredibly long, but it does have real impact. And so I think that goes a long way. So you're talking about, for like, especially in the for good thing, is like, have concrete goals that you want to accomplish with the piece. I think it shows everyone, including like investors and production companies, that you're thinking of it beyond what everyone else is thinking about, which is just, if I make it, it will do something good, which is in most cases, I think, like if you don't have that North Star, it could, but it's going to be harder because you just need more advocates for us. And then, I think it's like, it's still experimental, like do weird shit. I think is like, gets back to the same, like the like mechanic questions, like doing one mechanic well, but like try some crazy mechanics. You have the biggest benefit that you will never have in 4-ish years, which is you're a college student. So the expectation at the start is like extremely low. So anything you do well, people are like blown away. Like that was part of, I think, Assad's like biggest success was like, it's not just, oh, he made this piece, but it's like, oh, he made this piece and he's still a college student. I think if Chris Milk had made Terminal 3, I don't know if it would have had the same, pop. Like it's still an incredibly impactful piece, but the fact that they are this like younger generation, like it goes a long way. It goes a long way.
Yeah. It's good to lower expectations. Lower expectations all around. On that topic, I think since we get a lot of, I see a ton of projects across my desk. And for me, if it's your first project, which if you're in college, it probably will be. And by first, it's like, first project to get out into the world and do something. You should definitely not spend too much time fundraising. Because if you don't have a track record of making something that's gone out into the world and been somewhat successful, it's incredibly difficult. So I think like in terms of scope and scale and how you approach it, like put it into the like by hook or crook, we're going to get it done. Try to develop the skills yourself or become friends with somebody else that's in a similar stage of their career, but have a different set of skills that you need to get your project done. Just figure out how you get it made and out into the world and have it do well enough. And then with your second project, that's when you should like try to be a little bit more ambitious and try to, raise some money. But if you haven't done something in VR that's gone out into the world and been kind of, somewhat successful, it's so hard to raise money. I mean, it's so hard, period, to raise money. But it's like exponentially, almost impossibly difficult to do it if you're early in your career and you haven't already released something.
Which Assad, I think Assad's like that, exactly what you're talking about. I was like, oh, like simple depth kit capture on a HoloLens, have an interview, some basic voice, like branching done to like a jester's tail, which is like, okay, we've got like CGI ASICs, meta stage capture on a Magic Leap, which has like basically been untested for volumetric capture at that point, especially as an independent company. It's like,
and there's almost a scale of like 10 to each of those projects, because the first one was holograms from Syria, right? That was done for free. And then you had Terminal 3, which was like, 10 times free is still free, but, somewhere in the $100,000 range. And then you had a Jester's Tale, which was another like major step up. And that's what you can do as an artist, is if, you build on your previous success and be more ambitious with the next one. But, be cognizant of where you are in that ladder.
I think that my good friend, Sam White, we started looking at projects through the lens of how many miracles does it take? And you should start with it's like, can you do, one miracle? And then if you want to do second project, is 2 miracles and 3 miracles. Like it's actually a very, very good scale to look at things through. And it helps you understand, like, it's hard to get any one of those miracles done. And you do need to build on that success, which is like both like financial is like one of those miracles, which I feel like is part of every single project requires that, through to like, technically, what do we have to do? Team, what do we have to do? It's a lot. And like, I think especially on the college side, you have the benefit of, you can throw the weight of the college behind you to try and lock in some of these things that like, I don't have the weight of, I don't know, you're like at NYU or whatever the school is, to say is like, can you use that as a leverage point to like have a conversation with a local museum? And then you're able to go, when you talk to financiers or potential production partners, like, look, we already have a museum on board to distribute it, and they'll show it in the space. Like that is huge. And you can kind of like work backwards from that. And it kind of has this cascade effect of like, you get one of those, or you get like an NVIDIA on board, or someone who's going to like even just give you the technical hardware, which may only cost like $2,000, but you can throw that team's logo on there, and suddenly you're just building that credibility piece by piece, versus going right after the financing.
So we've got 10 minutes left in our conversation. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, but I do want to open it up to people jumping in. So, Boo, you probably met at first look. I'm gonna loop him in, and then I'll loop Darren in, and anyone else that wants to raise their hand.
Okay, we got
So,
Lex in here.
Boo, you're being promoted to a panelist. Let's see. It takes a minute for it to work. He's got to accept it. But yeah, we had another question. Someone emailed me actually. Paul Mezer. He's a very fine VR creator. He asked, are you looking into LBE to offset the risk of VR content not paying off in the short run? And are you interested in games and interactive content? So maybe talk about that while Boo's getting looped in.
Super interested in interactive. I'm a huge gamer. When I finish my day, I'm going to go play Overwatch immediately. But so interactive, I think, is super interesting, especially in the context of 5G and how you unlock kind of like enhanced mobile gaming, blah, 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 all these different pieces. So gaming, 100% interactive, yes. I think we've been dipping more and more into it as we like basically over the last 2 years, which is kind of like something as simple as Terminal 3 and building more and more as we go on. We've got some pretty cool projects that are going to be more interactive that are coming out this year that I can't talk about, but very high priority. In terms of LBE, this is my number one crusade for the year, which is LBE. We're going to do a couple like super hard to hear things about LBE. The first thing about, and this is just my personal experience, but like for VRcades specifically, is like there's this conversation like, oh, there are VRcade, there's X number of VRcades. VRcades, if you are not onboarded within 30 seconds, they will most likely not put your project into VRcade. So that means basically anything narrative is effectively out, or most things narrative are effectively out, unless they've kind of like built that pedigree like a Spheres leading into it, where you kind of got enough laurels on the front that people just ignore that and go into it. You're making like 10, 15 cents per minute on that. So you have to really think about how many minutes that equals to recoup your costs. It's like,
and how many locations, how many headsets in that location. It's a massive roll up that you have to do. And then the accounting of keeping track of that, right? Like if you're going to be doing like a bunch of different mom and pop shops, like actually doing the legwork to make sure that you're getting paid from those, it's quite a challenge.
The idea of there being a ton of VRcades in China is awesome, but you have to translate your project into that language, which can be either done by you or potentially another company. Like, Vive, HTC Vive has done it in the past. So like, it's not crazy, but that's, I would say, one of the biggest things. And then as it relates to like cultural centers, museums, all of that, is like, I touched on it kind of at the beginning, which is any major museum, a LACMA-esque museum, a MoMA, all of those, they have their schedules locked for multiple years in advance, usually at least 2. So that is not a feasible recoup mechanism at all. The likelihood of getting in is extremely low. They are, in most cases, paying, it's like, if they are paying at all, it's specifically for the cost and operational costs of running that thing. You have to think, unless you yourself are going to be there for free, they have to pay a docent to be there to do these things, which usually costs, I would say, about like $100 a day, right, at minimum. And that's if you're lucky. So it's extremely hard, it's extremely hard to bet on LBEs as your recoup mechanism. It can be a portion of the blend, like it could be 10, 20, maybe 25%, but it is, I think, like, it's very difficult. And I want that to be realistic for every creator. It's just like, it's super hard and people are not, it's a very difficult thing to rely on. Sorry.
No. That's all really good. Boo, do we have you? Are you on the...
Can you hear me?
I can hear you and see you. What's up, man?
What's up, man? It's been a while, Jake. It's fun. Like this week I had a call with Renee and I'm here in Stockholm. It's super cold here, visiting LA. I actually came here to do some meetings with especially Uva Hundotter. She was the head of VR for Impact for HTC, and they were the ones who put some money in Blank Canvas for the first time.
Yeah.
And I actually came here to show her. She's not at HTC anymore. She's doing stuff with the World Economic Forum, and she's doing stuff with Human Development Goals and stuff like that. And for the first time, I was showing her the idea of Blank Canvas evolving from 360 video to a real-time project and multiplayer. And I showed her the video that I sent you with the millions of synapses being simulated in real time. And she really liked that idea. I really think you should get in touch with her. Maybe I'll do the connection next week or so. And I would love to have your input on all that stuff of the millions of synapses.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that and that's on me.
Cool. Thank you, Boo. And just so everyone knows, Boo's a great VR artist, XR artist from Brazil, and his project is called The Blank Canvas. Have you added it to Kaleidoscope yet? Can people see it on Kaleidoscope?
Yeah, and if not, it's blankcanvas.bio. You can see the first episode there. We're producing the second to be a real-time multi-user experience. Jay, get back to my emails.
Perfect.
It's
and
a really powerful piece, though. I like it a lot.
I was going to add Darren in, but it looks like he lowered his hand. But I might be able to promote him to. I've promoted you, Darren, to panelist if you're still around and want to be promoted. We'll see if he joins. Just to we've got a couple minutes left. I think. For me, let's see, what last questions do I have for you? I mean, there's so much stuff I wanted to talk. I wanted to talk about Sundance. I wanted to talk about like the vibe and momentum headed out of there. But I guess let's get your hot take on just like where you see the industry cruising this year in 2019. Like for me, it feels like we're still haven't quite bottomed out in the trough of disillusionment. And the standard, adoption curve of new technology. We definitely had I think the peak of the hype cycle in the 2016, end of 2016, beginning of 2017. But yeah, let me get your hot take on that.
I think as most people have seen as well, is like there's definitely a massive jumping of ship into the augmented reality boat, which I think is interesting. I think a lot of the like real-time production capabilities, I think, are becoming more front and center. Most of the major players are looking at how do we have a live mocap stage where people can puppet avatars and create content that either lives inside a virtual world, but can also be kind of like, sent out as something that's done in 2D as well. Like thinking about, is there a mocap stage show that can be done that you could either exist in virtual reality, or you could watch it on like something like Facebook Live and have this dynamic interaction with characters and worlds around you, which I'm super excited about. I think that's what I've always been most interested in, is how do you get to kind of these like dynamically evolving worlds based on user input, be it like biometrics, which is where I really want to get to, or something as simple as voice. So it'll be interesting. I think these next couple months will be pretty indicative, but like I have a lot of faith in the future of VR specifically, with kind of like the rollout of things like the Oculus Go. Like, look, it's not the most powerful thing in the world, but I think it's providing like another avenue for people to experience it with the click of a button, which is really, really important.
And headset sales haven't been terrible for Oculus Go. Like I think they sold like 600,000 over the holiday season.
Yeah, I mean, I bought at least 4, so like, look, that's the way to get out. Sorry, I meant the Quest, but it's like that standalone headset. Like more and more, I'm interested to see how it does. I'm a pragmatic optimist by nature, so I think I want it to succeed, and I think it is like providing that gradient of options for consumers is really, really important.
Cool.
Yeah.
Darren has been added, so I'm going to let Darren jump in and ask a question, and then we have one more Q&A question about 5G, which I know you want to talk about.
We'll see.
Darren, what's up, man?
Hey, Jake. Hey, Renee. How are you guys?
Hey.
Doing good.
You guys can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to just creatively, Jake, just sort of go like 30,000 feet in terms of VR as a storytelling tool and get your thoughts on sort of narrative versus documentary and what you think is sort of the best use of VR. I mean, in my experience as a sort of conventional filmmaker, I feel like we spend a lot of time trying to narrow the focus of the audience's attention, and feel like documentary is mostly trying to be immersive and to sort of see everything and be sort of in the moment. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, and what VR, in your opinion, is maybe best suited for, or what you feel about in the documentary space, how VR can sort of affect some real sort of change in the format.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I just did a Q&A yesterday about this, and I think like you're not like in any scenario, in most scenarios anyway, at least in the short term, until we're getting to this like algorithmically world creation setup, is like it's all kind of pre-programmed to a degree. It's kind of just like what's the depth and breadth of that programming. Bandersnatch, I think, is super interesting of like getting into that more interactive space. For like documentary specifically, I had us very intentionally start moving away from 360 documentary when I came to Riot, but like still doing documentary style projects. So like Mind at War is still very much a documentary of one man's life, but it's done in kind of within a 6-stop experience. The short answer I'm going to give is like, I don't, the medium is just like, it's just a pen. Like you can use the pen to write a short story, a novella, a novel. It's all about how you use it. Like there are great documentaries that are just 360, that are 360. There are ones that are 6-stop, and it should be tailored to the experience. With Mind at War, for example, why tilt brush? Why these frozen memories? The reason why is like when you experience PTSD, there's kind of like this absence of memory that's created. Because of the trauma, right? Through that, Mind at War with frozen memories is the perfect way to experience it, which is you're getting to see these moments that have been, to a degree erased from his mind, that he's looking back on, seeking, trying to understand. There's this incredible project, Vestige, which is one woman's memory of the loss of her husband and her dealing with the grief of that. And that's a 6-stop experience that kind of has like branching narrative depending on which direction you're looking and who you're following. It's this kind of like intangible sense of this person who's been lost that you are seeing like these depth kit captures of them depending on where you look. That one makes sense for that specific style because of the way that she is like remembering and kind of half forgetting the loss of her husband. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it sounds like the sort of the sweet spots in the middle where you're sort of taking real stories and then you're able to use VR sort of expressionistically to create a new world.
Yeah, and I think if you haven't, Journalism 360 continues to be my all-time favorite blog for basically exploring immersive documentaries. Like it's incredible. The resources they provide are really, really fantastic if you're excited to like explore the space.
Jake, I'm sure you've got shit to do because you're crazy busy. We're 5 minutes over. We have one question in the Q&A from Trent. Do you want to give it a whack, or do you gotta bounce? I don't know if you can see it. Do you want me to read it out?
The 5G question?
Yeah, such a great panel. Thank you both. Thank you, Trent. Could you lend any insight about how 5G might carry XR forward? Wondering about implications for more affordable hardware, if faster network speeds can allow cloud gaming / experiences.
Faster network speeds will enable more cloud gaming experiences. If people aren't already, Qualcomm has an incredible blog and basically monthly webinar where they go super in depth on kind of like what the future of 5G is across a bunch of different sectors, which I know there's like not a ton in the public sphere. So it's like a fantastic resource. Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, it's going to just take all the processing power off of your device and put it into the cloud, which makes, I think, everyone's lives a lot easier from like the creator side through to the consumer side. There's a lot of conversation around virtual beings was a big part of Sundance, and how we get to like these interactive characters that you can talk to and explore. And like, you can't, in my opinion, it's going to be very difficult to do that without some sort of off-device rendering going on, right? Otherwise, you're going to be limited to either like ridiculous file sizes where you're downloading this character's understanding of, ancient Greece and mathematics and narrative experiences, or it's going to be something that exists solely in the cloud that you can access basically at any time.
Cool. Thank you for that. What was the name of that blog? Patricia on the line said, "Hello, Patricia. I know I owe you an email too. By the way, I've been sick all week. I'll get to you today or on Monday at the latest." Yeah. What was that? Was it Qualcomm something or other?
Yeah. So, and can I send you stuff, Renee? Is it easy?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Send me stuff or add it to the chat right now if you've got a link, or you can do it afterwards, and I'll I guess include it in next week's email out about next week's Friday forum.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll send a couple of things because I hop on that basically every time they have one of them. They're helpful. Again, they're not like you're not going to get all the dirty secrets, but you're going to get, I think, like a really nice comprehensive snapshot.
Badass. Well, Jake, this is awesome. Again, I feel like we've just scratched the surface. So maybe in like 4 or 5 months, we'll have you on again and we can dive into more stuff. But
we'll be on the tail end of festival season too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining. Next week, let me give you a quick, next week we have Balthazar from Inner Space, and I'm really excited about next week's one. You guys should definitely check it out because Balthazar and Heyun and Adrien from Inner Space, they just released Tale of the Tiny Fisherman, which they've been working on for a very long time, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I'm really excited to see how it's doing and how it's being received. I think we'll learn a lot because that's very high-end narrative VR, and they pushed it really well to all the major headsets. So definitely tune in next week. Thank you again, Jake, and we'll see you around, man.